Hi, welcome to our second episode of STEM Forest Talks. I am Joshua Odie, the author of STEM Forest books, and I'm joined here by the illustrator of STEM Forest books. Say hi.
Hello.
Okay, and as normal STEM Forest Talks, I'm just going to sit here and rant about some random STEM themed topic. Okay, illustrator, can you tell us what our topic for the day is?
Colors.
Colors! All right. Do you have anything more specific than that?
Yes, what physically are colors?
Okay, what physically are colors? So, everyone has experienced colors. Everyone with color vision has experienced colors. And whenever you are in grade school, you're oftentimes taught about the primary colors. You're oftentimes taught that there's let me change the background color on here so it's more neutral, make it white. You're oftentimes told that there's like blue, there's green, and then there's red, and every color is a mixture of these three pigments. Would you say that's about right, illustrator? Come on, say words. This is a podcast. They can't see your head.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But as we've probably all learned, there's this thing called light out there, and the colors and everything you see comes from light. So in general, light is electromagnetic waves. So you have waves of electric fields, and then you have waves of magnetic fields that are going perpendicular to one another. And if you studied electromagnetism, a changing electric field makes a magnetic field, and a changing magnetic field makes an electric field. So the fact that the two are changing in sync with each other makes them create the other one. This is how the wave propagates, at least according to sort of classical mechanics. It's a little more complicated once we start talking about quantum mechanics, but for our discussion of color, you don't really need to know much about quantum mechanics or anything. So we're just going to stick with the classical description. Okay. Now, depending on how long the waves are, if the waves are really long, then the waves have less energy, and if they're really short, they have more energy. Okay? Whenever you have less energy, the way that you interact with things changes, and when you have more energy, the ways you interact with things changes. So in terms of really low energy, we have like radio waves. These are really low energy waves. And then when you get to really high energy waves, you have like X-rays and gamma rays. These have a lot of energy in them. And then somewhere in the middle, we have visible light. Okay, so that's the short and the sweet of the visible light. Now, inside of human eyes, you have rods and cones. So these are little color receptors. So these are little receptors in the back of your eye that whenever a light comes in of the appropriate frequency, it interacts with the chemical inside of the rod or the cone that tells that cell that, hey, light hit me. Okay? And this is physically what is happening to let your eye see it. You have these chemicals inside of your rods and your cones that have chemical reactions happen when lights hit them, and the cells can detect that and send that signal to your brain to let you know that light hit it. Okay? Now, as I've described it so far, it seems like you'd only be able to see like black and white. You can see if the cells detect it or the cells didn't. The reason that you can see in color is that within your cones, you actually have three different kinds. You have three different kinds of cones that are all sensitive to different spectrums of light. So you have some of them that are most sensitive to more red lights, and it has some sort of peak here where it's most sensitive, and this peak is somewhere in the red spectrum, and as you get further away from that peak, that kind of cone cell is less sensitive, in addition to one that's more sensitive to red You also have one that's more sensitive to green. Now it also has a peak, and as you get further away from that peak, it'll be less sensitive to green. And then you have one that's most sensitive to blue. And again, as you get further away from that peak, it will pick up less light. And there's some overlap between all of these. So depending on what spectrum of light you actually have hit your eyes, it will look at a different color. So if it hits you, if it's a really long wavelength, if it's a really long wavelength, then it will just look red. If it's a really short wavelength, it will look blue. And if it's really, really short, it'll actually be so far out that the green and the red cells aren't picking up at all. It'll actually look violet. So the most things that trigger your blue light cells the most are just violet colors. Okay, Illustrator, are you following me? A little bit?
A little bit.
Yeah, so basically, just to recap, you have inside of your cones in your eyes, you have 3 different kinds. Each one of them has a sensitivity that's sort of like a normal distribution, and they have a peak sensitivity. And one of them is most sensitive to red, one of them is most sensitive to green, and one of them is most sensitive to blue. And based off of how much a certain area in your eyes gets stimulated, like if it's about half split between red and then half split between green, your brain will interpret that as being yellow. And this can happen either because you have some spectrum of light, some wavelength of light that's coming in, and it's about halfway between the red and the green, but it can also be simulated just as well by having just 2 wavelengths of light that are hitting it, and one of it's red and one of it's green, and they're both hitting at the same time. You can't tell the difference between the 2. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I mentioned before that there are rods and cones in your eyes, right? And so far I've been talking about the cones. And we generally think of the cones as seeing color. Do you remember what the rods are, Illustrator? Remember what the rods are in your eye?
Something in your eye that sees a specific color, I think.
Yeah, so not really. So generally the way that we describe the two is we normally describe your cones as being in color. And we generally describe your rods as being in black and white. Okay? You know, do you think this is true? Do your rods see black and white?
Probably.
So for your cones, we say that they see in color because you have cones that see red, you have cones that see green, and you have cones that see violet. But, each one of these types of cones only see one color. And for your rods, it is true you only have one kind of rod, but there isn't such a thing as like a black or white color. So your rods are also sensitive to a color. So what color do you think rods are most sensitive to?
Bright colors.
Well, what color? Please describe a color.
I don't know, neon, some neon colors. Yellow, blue.
Okay, so rods are actually most sensitive to cyan. So
that was gonna be my next guess.
it's gonna be your next guess.
I was gonna say blue.
Yeah, so like I said before, you have your green cones, and you have your blue cones. Your rods actually have a sensitivity that are somewhere in the middle here, so they're most sensitive to cyan. This is just an interesting fun fact, and the main purpose of rods is actually to fill up your vision. So if you actually look at your visual field, whatever you're looking at directly, you have sort of like high definition focus exactly where you're looking, and that's because the center of your vision is full of cones. But you may have noticed, even if you're not looking at something directly, you can still see it. And that's mostly because everywhere that's in your peripheral vision, you see them using rods. So the rods, your brain generally interprets them as being black and white because when your brain is trying to see color, you will move your eyes to it and you will see it with your cones. And your rods, your brain knows cannot see the different colors, so your brain sort of just interprets it as black and white, and it sort of fills in the detail just using things your brain knows about the world. But it's actually true that you can only see color at things you are looking at. Everything else that you're not directly looking at, you see in black and white, and your brain fills it in. Your brain actually fills in a lot of things that you see. Okay? So you can only see color on things you look at directly. Everywhere else is just black and white. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you think of any weird implications of this if the stuff in your peripheral vision is mostly black and white?
Weird implications?
Or, yeah, if it's mostly the rods.
You're not going to be able to see other colors?
Yeah, so you can't see things in your peripheral. That's a little bit weird. But you generally can fill it in. One of the really weird things that I'd mentioned before is that your rods actually don't see in black and white. What color do your rods see in?
Was it RGB?
No, your cones have a red cone, a green cone, and a blue cone. What color are your rods most sensitive to?
I don't know. Oh wait, was it cyan?
It's cyan. Yeah, so your rods are most sensitive to cyan. So between the red, green, and the blue, which color are they least sensitive to? If cyan's between green and blue, which one of red, green, and blue are they at least sensitive to?
Red.
Red. So it turns out your rods actually are not very good at seeing red. And there's another interesting thing about your rods and your cones. Your cones need a lot of light to see. If you don't get a lot of light, then your cones can't see much. Your rods are very sensitive, so they can see better in low light. So as you start transitioning from really bright environments, it goes from so in light environments, your cones see detail. So in light environments, your cones see detail. But in dark environments, your rods see detail. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you think this implies as it starts to get darker? You go from your cones seeing, which you can see in red, green, and blue, to your transition slowly to mostly your rods seeing that only see in cyan. So what sort of effects should that make?
It makes your perception weaker.
Okay, it does, but what does it do? You've been in a dark room before, in dark places. What color do things look when it's dark?
Mostly black or dark blue.
Mm-hmm. So whenever it's dark, it looks,
Dark.
obviously black. But if you see a color, you usually see cyan. You can interpret it as being blue if you like, but it's cyan.
Okay.
In particular, whenever it's really dark out, what color can you not see very well?
Anything that's bright.
Whenever it's dark out, you can't see bright things.
No.
I think you're really good at seeing bright things when it's dark.
What?
When it's dark, it's really easy to see bright things because they look brighter.
Well, bright colors. Not bright things. Like bright colors.
What's a bright color?
Like a light orange.
Like a light
or
orange?
Yellow.
Like a yellow? The answer I'm looking for are red colors. So red would also include things that are mostly red. Orange is mostly red. Yellow is mostly red. Like the more red it is, the worse you're going to be seeing it. Yeah. This is commonly known as the Purkinje effect. I don't remember how to spell it. Purkinje effect. And it's mostly observed that if you go out to a flower garden and you look at the flowers, during the day the reds look really bright and the blues look less bright, but as it gets down to like sunset and it starts getting darker, the red colors look darker faster than the blue colors do. This shift in our perception is called the Purkinje effect. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you have any questions for me about lights?
Yes. How do other animals see colors?
Ah, good. So, what I've said mostly so far is that people have they have cones that are mostly sensitive to red, green, and blue, and of course we have the rods, but we'll ignore them for now. And oftentimes people assume that most animals also can see red, green, and blue. Do you think that's true or not true?
I think some are able to see it.
Yeah, some are. So red, green, and blue being the primary colors is mostly a primate thing. So humans see in 3 colors. Monkeys see in 3 colors. Red, green, and blue is a primate thing. So it's mostly just primates can see it. Okay? Of course, there are lots of animals that aren't primates. So let's talk about mammals. What colors do you think most mammals can see in?
Black and white.
No, mammals still have color vision. Which colors do you think they have? So humans and other primates can see 3 colors, red, green, and blue. How many colors do you think most primates can see in?
Probably 2.
2, yeah. Can you want to guess which ones they are?
Red and blue or black and white.
Okay, it's mostly blue. So again, I'm going to re-emphasize, white is not a color.
Gray.
Like I'm talking about like pure, like in terms of spectrum, like electromagnetic spectrum. White is a sort of a uniform stimulation of the colors. Yeah, I'll talk about that again in a little bit. But primates can basically see blue and like a greeny yellow color. I'm just going to call it green because I think it's the same as our green receptors, but yeah, I'll just call it green. So most mammals can see just blue and green. Okay? What about other animals? What about like lizards and stuff? What do you think about them?
Did they see all types?
Well, what's all types?
Red, green, blue, a wide range.
I actually don't remember. I didn't look it up. I think it's more, but I don't remember. I'll have to look that up after the show. Yeah. Can you make a note to remind me to look up lizards?
Yes.
Okay. Fine. But are there any animals that we definitely know can see more colors? And yes. This is just a fun fact that a lot of people know. Mantis shrimps, which are these little cool little shrimps, mantis shrimps can actually see in 12 colors. So humans can basically only see in 3. Mantis shrimp can see in 12. Okay. Now, do you think that most animals see colors in the kind of way that humans do?
Probably not.
Okay. Can you think of another way that someone would see colors? So I mentioned that the previous way of working is that we have rods and we have cones, and then in our cones we have 3 different kinds, and each kind of cone is sensitive to a specific wavelength of color. So, do you have any idea of another way to see color besides having different kinds of cones that are sensitive to different kinds of colors?
Seeing night vision.
Okay, but like
I don't know if that counts.
mechanistically, what are you describing?
Like seeing black and not white, like grayscale colors.
Right, but
nighttime.
physically, how would you tell colors based off of that? I'm asking for
Oh.
like a physical mechanism here.
I don't know.
Okay. So right now the mechanism is that you have different things that see different colors. Do you have any other suggestions?
No.
No? Yeah, so I think this is sort of like an obvious way to do it, but there is at least one other way. Have you seen that like prism experiment where you shoot a beam of light into a prism and it separates it out into a rainbow effect?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's this famous Newton experiment. Let me change the background color to gray so I can draw this picture. Okay, and in this Newton experiment, you have this little triangular piece of glass, and you have this little beam of light that comes in, and it hits it. And when the beam of light hits it, it separates into basically a whole rainbow of different colors. I'm just going to not try to draw this real detailed, and I'll just do a little picture example. So it splits up into red, some orange, splits up into some yellow, just splits them up all into a rainbow of colors whenever it goes through the thing. Okay, do you remember why this splits them up?
No, but is it something about frequencies?
It is about frequency. So I mentioned at the start of this that the different colors of light, the difference between them is how long they are as waves. So if we come over here to red, red is long, and whenever we come over here to blue, blue is short. And whenever these different frequencies hit this thing, they get bent different amounts based off of how which wavelength of light they are. And the longer ones get bent less, I think. I'm not sure about that, but I think that's how it works. So I think I actually drew my picture backwards up here. But the longer ones get bent less and the shorter ones get bent more. So by hitting them and taking the light and having it hit a piece of glass that bends it, this will separate it out into a rainbow effect. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So one way that you can actually see the color of light is if you have something that's just in general sensitive to light. Of course, it's going to have a peak sensitivity somewhere, but let's just say it's just like sensitivity to cyan, like our rods. Then if you have a particular thing that bends the light in such a way that bends the light, you can actually tell what color it is based off of how much that bends it. So you can make little diffraction patterns, and what actual pattern you get will depend on what color actually hits it. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you think there's any type of animal that actually sees this way?
Maybe.
Yeah? Maybe there is a type of animal. It's kind of a radically different way to see colors. So if we want to try to find an animal that does this, we need someone that's kind of like real weird, okay? Can you think of a really weird animal? I'll give you the hint. It lives in the ocean.
Oh,
what's wrong?
no, is it owl?
Or an owl? No, I mean, all the land animals see this way.
Okay.
Okay. I think there might be an insect that's weird, but I don't think so. Might have to double check. Can you think of an ocean animal that's really weird? Particularly if it has an eye that looks really funky.
Is it an eel?
Mm-mm. So, as you probably know, there are different animals with different shapes of eyes. People's eyes or pupils basically look like circles. Can you think of another animal with a different shaped eye, like a different shaped pupil?
Seahorse?
Well, you can think of a land animal for right now.
Oh, that's a different shape eye, like snake?
Yeah, snakes or cats, they tend to have slits, like vertical slits, yeah.
Yeah.
And any other land animal, different shape eye?
I'm not thinking of one right now. Is an owl different?
So a lot of herbivores, like goats and cows and stuff, their pupils are actually kind of horizontal. So they look kind of like horizontal little ovals. You haven't seen one of those before?
I feel like I have like a sheep.
Yeah, like a sheep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are sort of like normal eye shapes. Now, do you know of any really weird ones? That's like not one of these.
No, I don't.
Okay, so I sort of buried the lead here. But the weird one out there is the cuttlefish. And the cuttlefish eyes kind of look like W's, kind of. You want to look up a cuttlefish eye?
No, I'm scared.
Okay, so cuttlefish eyes are really weird. The cuttlefish in general are really weird. They're sort of like chameleons and octopuses. They can change the color that they are, and they can change it really fast, and they can do all of that. And the interesting thing about it is that cuttlefish eyes only are sensitive to one pigment. So by the way that we defined it before, cuttlefish can only see one color, okay? In terms of they only have one color of light they're sensitive to. So, how do they see color?
They don't?
They do. They can actually they can sort of tweak how close the different parts of the W are to each other. And this will give different diffraction patterns based off of the wavelength of light. So basically seeing by how changing the shape of their eye changes the focus of the thing they're looking at, they can tell what color it is because different colors bend differently. So even though we see colors by seeing red, green, and blue, and this is how most animals do it, there are actually other ways to see color. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of way do you think cameras work?
Cameras?
Mm-hmm.
For colors?
Mm-hmm.
Probably something along the lines of... Actually, I don't know. Something with the light going through the lens and bending.
Well, no. Cameras do it basically the same way people do. So, I didn't mention how eyes work. Eyes take in a bunch of light and then they bend it to where light coming from one direction tends to focus on a particular point. But that's sort of not the point here. This is how you can figure out which direction it's coming from. But cameras, basically, they have different colored, they have little solar panels in the back of them. And over the different solar panels, they have little light filters. So you have little red panels, and then you have little green panels, and so on. Okay. Do you have any other questions for me? Let me go ahead and finish this out. Blue panels. No, that's everything?
Did you answer what is color space? I feel like...
No, I have not talked about color space at all.
Okay.
Though while I'm on the subject of cameras, do you know which colors your eyes are most sensitive to? So your eyes can see in different amounts of detail based off of which colors it has, and that's because, in cones you have the red ones, the green ones, and the blue ones. you don't have the same numbers of all of them. So which one do you think has the most?
The most
Yeah.
colors?
So in terms of your cones, do you think you have mostly red, green, or blue ones?
I think green.
Yeah, green. Yeah, green's the most. And which one do you have the least?
Blue.
Blue. Wow. You already knew this. How'd you know this?
Just a feeling. Just a guess.
Just a guess. Yeah, it's exactly right. So you have more green than anything else. So whenever people make cameras, or at least in the olden days, but to some extent now I still think it's true, you actually have more of the green pixels in the back than you have the other ones so they can see in detail. So have you ever wondered why people use green screens, why they're green? They are green because the cameras see in green better. So you can get a higher detail, like outline of the thing if you use green as the green screen than other colors.
Interesting.
Okay. Was there any other questions? So you had a question about color space?
Yes, just what is color space?
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about color space. So let's go back to pigments first. So I'd mentioned most people say that the primary colors are red, pigments are red, green, and blue, right? So these are like the primary ink pigments, right?
Yes.
You'll actually notice if you look at any printers, these are not the colors that printers use. Can you tell me what the colors that printers use?
Magenta.
Yeah?
Yellow.
Wait, let me write these down as you do. So there's magenta, yeah?
Yellow.
Yellow. And what else?
Cyan.
Cyan. And why do they use these colors instead of red, green, and blue?
I don't know.
So when we look at these colors, we think of this as a subtractive color system, okay? So I mentioned that your eyes can only see red, green, and blue, and by basically adding together the amount of red, the amount of green, the amount of blue that your eyes see, you can get all of the colors that you see, because they're based off how much the red ones are stimulated and how much the green ones are stimulated and how much the blue ones are stimulated, right?
Yes.
Okay. But whenever you have a piece of paper, your piece of paper is not actually going to, it doesn't emit light, right?
Right.
Paper doesn't emit light, it reflects light. So your paper cannot make red light, it can't make green light, it can't make blue light. What it's given is you're given a white light that's a mixture of red, green, and blue, and it has to give you back out the colors you want. So when people make inks, they're actually, the best way to do it is to not think about what color you're adding. It's to instead remove one of the colors you don't have. So magenta is, which color does magenta remove?
Green.
Yeah. So magenta removes green. And what color does yellow remove?
Red. Or
Guess again, it's not red.
and it's not green. Blue.
It removes blue. And what color does cyan remove?
Green. Red.
Red. Yeah, it removes the color that's on the opposite side of the color wheel. Yeah. So that's how the subtractive colors work. You can get a different subtractive color system with red, green, and blue pigments, but it does worse. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm going to draw you a little picture now. So I'm just going to talk about additive color systems for now. But whenever we talk about like a screen on a phone or something, it internally, it also has 3 pixels. It has like our red pixels that are next to our green pixels, which are next to our blue pixels, And it makes everything by combining those. So if you're given a given red, like let's say I'm given this red, and I'm given this green, and I'm given this blue, I can make any color that's like somewhere in between this like triangle between them, okay? So this red and this blue and this green defines a color space that's like this triangle, okay? But if I choose a red that is more red, and I use that red pigment, and I choose a green that is more green, and I use this green pigment, and I use a blue that is more blue, use this blue pigment, then I can get a color space that will hold all of the colors before it that are in this older color space, but also new ones, okay? Now, here I guess the first question I has, so I said that your eyes can see red, green, and blue. Is all the colors you can see a triangle? So is there like a greenest green and a reddest red? Is there a greenest green and a reddest red so that you can get any color in between them by just adding them together?
Yes.
No, it's not. So this goes back to the weirdness of actually what the sensitivities are. So if we go back to our pictures before, we have like our red sensitivity here. We have our red sensitivity here. It's like this normal distribution here. And we have this green sensitivity here. That's this green. And I guess to do this accurate, to get what the actual issue here is, also this third sensitivity that is this blue. And the issue here is that you can see a red that is like pure red. There is like a reddest red. And you can see a pure blue. So there is a bluest blue. But the issue is that the different greens, if you see green, the green will also see a little bit of blue and a little bit of red as well. So there are some hues over here that are mostly yellow, that's got no blue. And then there's some hues over here that are cyan, that have like no red. But if you use any green that's like that's close to a pure green, you'll always have to get some blue or some red with your green. And because of this, if you really want to represent this green over here that's got no blue, you cannot use this partially blue green in order to make it. So in fact, there is not like a greenest green that you can produce all the other colors with, because any like green will have a little bit of red and a little bit of blue, and that means that you can't make the shade of yellow that has no blue or the shade of cyan that has no red. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is actually something people have worked on a lot. So in, I want to say like the early 30s, people sort of like did a lot of work to map out the exact colors people could see, and it looks something like this. You have like this dome shape. So this dome shape are the colors that are visible. So, and then any sort of screen that we put in there, if we only have 3 pigments, so if we have a blue, red, and a green, it's going to be some triangle inside of here. And that's the best we can do with just red, blue, and green. If you want to do more colors, you can, but you're going to have to introduce someone else. Like you'd have to throw in like this yellow. You throw in this yellow, and now And now you, instead of having a triangle, you can actually do everything within like this four-sided shape. And so on if you want to get more colors. But in practice, we're actually not anywhere close to this space. We actually have a pretty small triangle that's our actual like color system we use. So we're not really to the point where we should be adding extra colors, but this is sort of what the color space problem is. And I've drawn for you like a red, green, and blue color space. If you are using CMYK space, so we have a yellow, we have a magenta, and we have like a cyan, then we'll get a different color space from subtracting these two. And for technical reasons, it won't be like a strict triangle. It'll look kind of like concave. It'll be sort of shapy, and this is just due to some technical details of how you actually put it down. Okay. Were there any other questions we have about light?
No.
No? Okay. Well, then that concludes our technical portion of STEM Forest Talks, and we'll move on to our next segment. What's our segment called?
STEM Forest Facts.
STEM Forest Facts? It's your segment time. What?
The illustrator asks.
Illustrator asks. Yeah. What do you want to ask?
I already asked. I was asking about the animals.
Oh, that was your illustrator ask?
Yes.
You have to give me questions that aren't on the thing.
Okay.
Okay, but you don't have anything ready? Okay.
No.
All right, for STEM Force Talks number 3, we're going to have an illustrator segment. Okay. What do we have for our STEM Force facts? What question do we have?
So what's ahia?
What is ahia? Okay. So in the STEM Forest Facts segment, I have mentioned that I am the author of STEM Forest books. In the STEM Forest Facts section, we are going to ask about something interesting about the STEM Forest universe. And one of our characters in this universe is Ahia. Ahia is a little character. She's gray, and she looks kind of like a ghost. Yeah? And if you see her in the book, she's always has a little bag with her. And this is her bag called Akpa. And our question is, what is Ahia? So do you have any guess of what Ahia is? I mean, you already know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So most people think that Ahia is a ghost, which would mean that like some girl died and then Ahia is her ghost. But Ahia is not a ghost. Ahia is, really I can say this right, Tsukumagami?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tsukumagami is an idea in Japanese mythology. And the idea is if you have some item, it doesn't matter what it is. So let's say it's a pair of scissors, just a nice pair of scissors. Okay. The idea is that if the scissors get old enough, they'll start to take on their own personality. And if they get even old enough, the scissors will eventually get their own spirits and they will basically be alive. And different people will disagree on about how long that is that it has to be before it comes alive. But the general convention is that it's about 100 years. After the item's been around for 100 years, then it becomes alive. And sort of, if you want to moralize it, one of the morals of this is that you should respect antiques. Because if they've been around for a really long time, not only are they probably of pretty high quality and have some sentimental value, but they might literally be alive. Okay? So Ahia is loosely based off of this, and Ahia is actually the Tsukumagami of that little gift bag that she has. So she is a spirit, but the spirit is like tied to that gift bag of hers. So she actually cannot leave the gift bag. It is a part of her. And this is inspired by the Tsukumagami. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Any follow-up questions?
Yes. Could one day become a djinn?
Yeah, a djinn. Yeah, so we have an upcoming book called Leaf and the Lyre, and in that book there is a little genie girl, and this little genie girl is just a girl who lives by herself. She's Misty. Her name's Iji Rigi, and so I sort of have this mythology into the story where Jinn, at least in my universe, not necessarily in Arabic mythology where genies are from, but in my universe, Jinn are basically the spirits from like a civilization that's basically doesn't no longer has traces of the people where it came from. Like all of the artifacts from it are gone or just like hidden somewhere. Maybe they're buried, and that's where the genies are from in the universe of STEMforce books. And in that sense, Ahia is kind of like a baby Jinn. So if she keeps going on like she is, she might one day become a Jinn, but right now she's just a baby.
And
So,
you already talked about how people think she's a ghost.
yeah, so as I mentioned, Ahia is the spirit of a gift bag. And whenever she first started showing up, like she started taking on her personality as a gift bag, when kids saw her, they thought that she was a ghost. So they just suddenly started seeing a little ghost girl, looking girl, by their gift bag, and people thought they were a ghost, and so everyone was scared of her. And because everyone was scared of her, she ran away, and that's how she went to the STEM forest. So she ran away from the people who were always scared of her, and she found a home in the STEM forest. Yeah. Hopefully, at one point, I'd like to do a book on that, but I have so many other things to get to first. Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay. Then that has been our second episode of STEMforce Talks. Hopefully we'll do even better next time. Is there anything you want to say to the audience, Illustrator?
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and have a good rest of whatever appropriate unit of time for whenever you are listening to this. Bye! Okay, I mentioned that I forgot to look up before the podcast started whether how many colors lizards can see. And it depends, for reptiles, it depends on the kind. So in general, oftentimes lizards can see in 4 colors, red, green, and blue, like humans can, but a lot of them can also see in ultraviolet light, UVAs in particular. So a lot of insects like bees also see in ultraviolet light. So actually, if you look at flowers will have ultraviolet patterns on them that you can't see. So often like just a plain white flower will actually have a pattern on it in the ultraviolet spectrum. So bees can see more things than you can. Reptiles oftentimes can also see ultraviolet as well. And there are snakes that can see in infrared. In particular, they can see in the infrared at a long enough wavelength that hot things actually emit them. So this gives snakes what is oftentimes called heat vision, where the snake is able to see heat because they can see light that is so infrared that actually just warm things emit it. So reptiles generally actually have more colors that they can see than humans can. Okay, that's the postscript. Good night.